All right, thanks guys for tuning in again. As always, if you can name tonight's intro song with the title and the band name, there is a free gift. Just reply on the YouTube channel, Appetite for Discussion, and in the comment section. I want to say a couple thank yous tonight. Thank you to Hunk of Junk Hauling for all your junk removal needs. Call Hunk of Junk Hauling or look them up at hunkofjunkhauling.com. Also, States Vegas Clothing Company, their local t-shirt company here in town. They print some of the old vintage shirts, just like the one I'm wearing here. You can find them on Facebook or Instagram at States Vegas Clothing. Also, guys, if you haven't downloaded the States Vegas Radio app, do so. Just go to your smartphone, go to the App Store, type in States Vegas Radio. It's simple. Download it. Also, I'd like to say a special thank you to Casey Tate and Farm Bureau Insurance. Guys, if you don't have any car, auto, or especially life insurance, give Casey a call at 704 633 4801 and he'll hook you up. Last but not least, to the law office of Dustin McCrary. Hopefully, no one here is going through a divorce, but if you are or you're about to, or child custody issues or alimony or anything like that, look up McCraryLaw.com and see if Dustin can't help you. Thanks, guys, and stay tuned for tonight's show with my guest, Les Bentz.
Welcome to the Appetite for Discussion show with your host, Brandon Crouch.
All right, thanks. Hey, Les, how's it going, buddy?
Good. How's it going, Brandon?
It's going well. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us here tonight.
Absolutely, man.
So for those of you watching at home, yes, I am here by myself. There is no one else. So if you don't want to look at my ugly mug, mine is Julius over there. But I think you guys are really going to be interested in tonight's show, even though there's not going to be any interaction with me and, say, a guest per se sitting here. But Les is a great storyteller. He's got some interesting stories, and we're fortunate enough to have him on tonight to share them with us. I'd let some of the audience members know a little ahead of time, Les, that you're a former rocket scientist who's turned into a guy who sold it all, bought a sailboat, and, that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg.
Well, thanks for that.
You're very welcome. So, so tell us, how does one? Well, just tell us about your time. I posted a video, or not a video, but a picture of something out in the middle of the desert launching a rocket, and that was thanks to you, right?
Yes. So my first job out of college was working for Lockheed, and we were working at White Sands Missile Range in southern New Mexico. And we had several different rocket programs that we were working with, where we would do different things to them, test them for survivability, drop them, crash them, shoot them with machine guns to see if they blow up, and then shake them and bake them and then load them up and take them out in the desert and shoot them and see how they performed. And sometimes it was kind of frightening, We had some things go wrong a few times. We took the power lines out along the highway one day because we shot one and it hit the desert and it bounced and came back up and took out the power line to Alamogordo, New Mexico. So that was kind of an excitement. But yeah, it was a neat job.
So when something like that happens, do you have to go in front of somebody and have a meeting? It's like, all right, so who miscalculated and blew out the power lines? I mean, how does that work?
We did. And every time we'd have some kind of an incident like that, it was kind of a serious business where we had to sit down with the commander of the missile range, and you had to tell him, hey, this is what happened and this is why it happened. Some of the stuff was just, stuff you couldn't foresee, like these rockets that we were shooting that took the power lines out. They were designed for very short-term or short-range firing. So they were kind of a rocket that you could use if you were rolling into town some town somewhere with your rocket launcher, and you weren't going to shoot, 15, 20 miles away. You were going to shoot a building that somebody was like holed up in, shooting it at you with machine guns. So they had like a flat nose on the front of them versus, something that looks more like a rocket, like a bullet, that has a nice tapered nose. And so this was the first test of these things, and they brought him out, and we looked at him and said, well, that looks interesting. And so we shot it very short distance, and it hit the floor of the desert and skipped just like you'd skip a rock on a lake. and everybody was kind of surprised by that, but hey, that's why you test them, right? And they were very good about giving us areas to shoot in where there was absolutely nobody around, and plenty of berths, so that if things did go wrong, you'd be able to recover without hurting anybody. So a lot of big open desert in southern New Mexico. It's a really interesting place.
I've never been to New Mexico at all. I'd like to get out there. But, so, like, the rockets you helped, they were, I guess you'd call them short range? They're not
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much short range, and we had both. We shot rockets and we shot missiles. The rockets are like a free flight, just like shooting a bullet out of a gun. And you shoot it up in the air and you calculate a trajectory, and it comes down. There's no guidance system to it. And as a matter of fact, we would even let a meteorological balloon go right before we'd shoot, and this balloon would rise up through the height of the apogee of the flight of the rocket, and it would give us information on wind directions and pressures and temperatures through the atmosphere, and we would use that information, that meteorological data, to punch it into an algorithm and adjust the course of our rockets, so that they were fairly short range. I don't remember exactly now what the range was, but they were fairly short range and very, very accurate with this meteorological data. And typically what they would do we'd shoot them over the target. They're spinning like a bullet coming out of a rifle, as they're flying through the air. And then at a particular height over the target, they would basically explode. And the main rockets that we dealt with was called the MLRS, Multiple Launch Rocket System, and each one of them had 600 plus little bomblets, which were basically like little grenades. And as this thing was spinning, it's showering out these grenades over the target. And each little grenade would come down, and it had a little ribbon on it that would arm the thing as it was falling through the air, and then it would hit the ground. And if it just landed on the ground, it would explode and fragment like a grenade. If it landed on, say, like a vehicle, a Humvee, a lightly armored vehicle, it had a little shape charge in it, and it would actually blow a big hole through, whatever it landed on. Very, very effective. I mean, they were amazing to watch the films in the impact areas as these things would come down. So that was kind of our main rocket.
And how many years ago was this when you were testing them?
Oh gosh, long time. This was in I was working with Lockheed at White Sands Missile Range from like 1987 to about 1992, 1993.
Damn.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's crazy to think about the technology 30 years ago and
yeah,
where it is. Because imagine, like, to me, that sounds like, oh, wow, I can see that happening today. But
right.
I can't even imagine, there's going to be this super space force or something, where they're going to be
Right.
fighting
The
in
new
orbit, which I don't think works, right? I mean, by no means am I a science guy, and I don't ever pretend to be one, but how do one fight in the same orbit traveling at 18,000 miles an hour?
Right. Oh no, things change, right? And
Things
it's
change.
like everything else. You've got to keep up with the latest technology to have an effective weapon. And some of the projects we worked on were really cool. We worked on missiles that were guided that would shoot other missiles out of the air. A lot of this stuff was kind of being developed for the Gulf War. This was all pre-Gulf War. So a lot of missiles that were guided that didn't have any explosives in them at all, but they had like a depleted uranium rod inside of the rocket, and they would go so fast. They were called hypervelocity missiles, and they would go faster than a mile a second, basically. And when they hit something, that penetrator rod would just annihilate whatever it hit. It was crazy. It was a massive explosion. We shot a tank, a remote-controlled tank, one time with one of these things, and we blew the top of the tank clean off the tank. It was amazing. So it was like a really good experiment. It was a lot of fun. Every time we'd shoot one, you never knew what was going to happen exactly.
And this was every day. You guys were out there just blowing stuff up.
Blowing stuff up, yep, and getting ready to blow stuff up, and we had several different programs. We had one that was a chemical weapon that would shower down this big purple cloud over the target, and we had special equipment in our impact area that would sample the air as this cloud would come down, and like in a 2-mile radius impact area, this cloud would drift down over the impact area, and these little samplers would be able to tell you, the concentration of the liquid at different points in the impact area. So that was pretty neat stuff. We had another one that would lay out a minefield. So if in those days there was always a threat that the Russians would come over the mountains into Europe with tanks, and that was a big threat. So they had these missiles or rockets that we would shoot that would lay out mines, and they were really cool. They would explode over the target, and about 15 or so mines would come falling out of the sky, and these things would land, and these little legs would pop out, and they'd stand up, and they had different ways. Yeah, they'd jump up, and then they'd sit there, and depending on how you had them programmed, some of them had like a big antenna, like a metal antenna. And the idea was that as the tanks would then roll over the top of them, they'd hit that metal antenna, and the thing would go off and blow the tanks up. So it was like an anti-tank missile, lay out a minefield.
Hey Les,
So,
this is Julius. I'm the man
Yeah.
behind the scenes here at the Appetite for Discussion show. We have a little in common. I'm listening to your stories. They sound familiar. I was stationed at Edwards Air Force Base from 88 to 92 out in the Mojave Desert, and I was a B-52 crew chief, and we tested the Advanced Cruise Missile and a Tacit Rainbow missile
Nice.
rocket. If you've ever heard of those, I don't know.
yeah.
I'm sure you probably did if you were around about those times. So I just thought it was really interesting to hear your stories. They sounded familiar. I remember. I think we dealt mostly with Boeing guys, but I would always enjoy when the guys come off the plane. We'd ask them about what happened, and they would give us these great stories about how they lost the missile and they didn't know where. I think some of those things had a 2,000-mile flight plan. So they would go up and chase them around for a long time. And
Chase them where?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, who's going to go get that thing?
they had every airplane in the Air Force, the Marines would send planes to chase these missiles around. So when we would launch the B-52 to launch a cruise missile, there would be anywhere from 13 to 15 planes that would go up with us. So we definitely had to have our plane ready to get off the ground because all these other planes were sitting on a flight line.
So did you guys just shoot it out of the air? Is that what you did?
No, they would follow it to
They
make
would
sure
follow
it was going the flight plan. It was
the flight plan
where it was supposed to go.
And
And they would come back, and we'd ask the rocket scientists like Mr. Les here, what happened? And it was either a thumbs up or a thumbs down or some crazy story, And we always enjoyed talking to the rocket scientist guys.
Great stuff. I mean, yeah, same thing. we'd have a fin break off a rocket, and then it would go, corkscrew off off over the horizon somewhere, and we'd spend a couple days in a helicopter just buzzing around in the desert looking for the impact of this thing, and try and bring the debris back and find out why that fin broke off or why some little part went awry to cause the thing to go nuts. Same thing I'm sure that you guys were doing. It was interesting work. It was really a lot of fun.
So I want to go back a second to this bomb or missile, whatever you call it, that would land, and then these basically little aliens come out and walk around. I mean, this sounds like something science fiction that we would watch now, but I guess to me it's just crazy that this was 30 years ago. And imagine if you were doing that. What are we doing now that we don't even know about? I don't think I want to know.
Right,
my
right.
little brain can't handle it.
Right.
Like you're shooting this, the purple dust, and let's see where it lands, and this and that. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh shit.
What's out there that we don't know about?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh man, the jet stream thing's real. The chem stream from the planes. I knew it. I told everybody they were nuts, but no, Les was working on this 30 years ago.
Really, really crazy toys, man. And I always wondered, who are the guys that dream this stuff up?
Yeah.
Who sits around and says, gee, if we did it like this, it's going to work even better. So always exciting.
So now, how long did you do that job for?
That was almost 7 years, I guess. That was my first job out of college, and it was pretty exciting. At one point, we manufactured both the rockets and also the rocket launcher, the multiple launch rocket system launcher. And it was like a big tracked vehicle that had basically a box on the back of it. And you would load these rockets into it in 6-packs. So it could hold 12 rockets at a time. And that was pretty much the weapon of choice for the Gulf War. So,
Yeah.
Right before the Gulf War started, before they bombed Baghdad, they were positioning these multiple launch rocket systems along the Iraqi border, getting ready to roll into Iraq and surround the bad guys. And so right before the war started, Lockheed had come out with a new way to shield the front of this rocket launcher, because when the rockets take off, the plume of the rocket was very hot and very abrasive, and the rocket launcher was actually made out of like a real heavy aluminum, like an armor plate aluminum, and it would eat the plume as you launch these rockets would eat that aluminum away. So we had these panels, they called them blast panels, all over the front side of the launcher. And as you shot, these things would protect the launcher, but they would wear out, and they were made out of like a real thick rubber, like 2 inches of rubber. And so they said, well, gee, if we made them out of titanium, instead of being able to fire 50 rockets and then have to do maintenance and replace them, we can do 230 rockets or something, a number like that.
Yeah.
Much longer between maintenance procedures.
Sure.
So they said, well, let's go retrofit all the launchers that we've got along the Iraqi border with these new blast panels. And they were looking for volunteers, so I volunteered. So went over to Saudi Arabia for a couple months and lived in the desert and went from battalion to battalion retrofitting all these multiple launch rocket systems with the new blast panels.
What was that like?
Oh, it was great. I mean, we had our own Hummer, we're driving our Hummer through the desert, and everybody, nobody knew who we were. They thought we were like some undercover CIA or something, but we were just basically glorified mechanics going out and working on these rocket launchers. But it was really an interesting experience. All the logistics of all the Allied forces moving their equipment into place, getting ready for when they bombed Baghdad, when they started Desert Storm, was just phenomenal to see the logistical efforts of all the countries involved. It was really interesting stuff. And so we did our work, and then shortly after we were done, they bombed Baghdad, and so we left the country. So at that time they'd shut down all the airports in Saudi Arabia, so we ended up driving to Bahrain and flew out of Bahrain, caught the last commercial flight out of Bahrain.
That's cutting it close.
Yeah, it
Would have
was
the last help flight out.
right.
No thanks.
Yeah,
Good for you,
right.
man, and good for you, Julius, for being there and volunteering and serving and all that stuff, man. But I love it. You're like, yeah, it was great. We're blowing stuff up. We're at war. It was super cool.
Yeah, we were a long ways away from anything that was blowing up. So that was
That's what I was going to
pretty
ask you. How close did you get to anything that was actually blowing up?
nothing. I mean, we never saw anything. It was they gave us a gas mask to carry around everywhere with us, and little injectors for nerve agent and stuff. But we never had to use them or even were threatened with it.
Yeah,
But we did stay in a place in Saudi Arabia called Khobar Towers, and it was a whole bunch of high-rise apartment buildings that, for whatever reason, the government was able to house the military in, while they were there, and they ended up as the Saddam Hussein fired a Scud missile, which was kind of a squirrely missile. They never really knew where they were going to go. It was an old missile that was really inaccurate, and they fired a Scud missile, and it hit Khobar Towers shortly after we left, and killed some of our guys. It was a kind of a bad deal.
So if I understand this correctly, they put all you guys in the tallest tower in the town.
And painted them red.
Yeah, with a big circle around it and an arrow like flashing. They're here.
Right. Well, this was in Saudi Arabia, so it was out of the official war zone or whatever.
Right.
And it was supposed to be fairly safe, and they had like a compound built around it. Lots of barricades and sandbags and kind of stuff. And the Patriot missile was in use. That was what they were using, which was kind of a modified missile to shoot these Scuds down, and they did a really good job of it. But one of them got through and hit the Khobar Towers where we were staying. After we were gone, and caused a lot of damage, caused a lot of loss of life. It was unfortunate. But
so then, from after the Gulf War, you stayed around for a little while longer, or then you moved on?
Yep,
there?
Stayed around for a little while longer with Lockheed, and the political climate in those days. This must have been, I guess, early '90s, late '80s. The political climate was changing a little bit. Bill Clinton was just coming into the White House, the Clinton administration, and they were cutting back a lot of the defense spending at the time. And I was living in a small town that really about the only thing going in that town that I was in was defense contracting out at White Sands. And so I thought, it's probably a good time to start looking for another job, because this one may or may not be around for a long time. And it turned out that it was. It's still, a lot of my buddies that were there 25 years ago are still working there and have been, and no problem. But yeah, so I decided it was time for a change and left Las Cruces, New Mexico, and went north to the big city of Albuquerque and started a different career.
So what part was it? There's a lot of people who are like, you talk to people all the time. They're fed up with stuff. They're fed up with their job. They're doing this. They're doing that, and they go, you know what? I'm just going to sell it all, and I'm going to go live on a sailboat, or I'm going to go live on an island somewhere. But for you people at home who have said that, guess what? He did it. Okay? He had the huevos to actually go, I'm doing it. Right? I mean, You did it.
Yeah. I don't know if it was, huevos or if it was just ignorance. Hard to say what. But yeah, my wife and I, we didn't really know anything about sailing, and and we thought, this sounds pretty cool. Let's maybe give it a go. So we figured we first needed to learn how to sail before we could go sail around
Yeah, there's not a
the
lot of
oceans.
how much oceans around New Mexico and Albuquerque?
Oh my gosh, we've got the mighty Rio Grande River is, about it. That was about it. So so we bought a little sailboat and we learned how to sail on a tiny little lake in northern New Mexico, but we really enjoyed it. And this was kind of something we thought, hey, someday we're gonna go sailing, after retirement probably, and we'll take off and we'll go sailing around and just explore, cruise, And so we started sailing on the little lake in the mountains, and we really enjoyed it. And at that time, we had a daughter that was, I guess, probably about 10 years old. And so my wife started looking into, doing a lot of reading and research about what it takes to cruise when you retire. And she found out that a lot of people were taking off earlier in life and they were bringing their children with them. And they said it was a great experience for their children. It was a great education. They got to see a lot of different places. They got to see a lot of different cultures. And so she started kind of incubating this idea that, hey, we can go earlier. Than we don't have to wait till we're retired, and who knows, we might not live that long anyway, right? So let's think about accelerating the plan. And so we did. We said, hey, I think we can do this. And so we sold our house and we moved into a really, really small place that was like 650 square foot and in total, with our daughter and all of our belongings. And we stayed there for, oh gosh, about 5 years.
5 years.
And
I mean, there
yeah.
are garages that are that size.
Oh yeah, there's bigger garages for sure than this little place.
5 years and
But
600. That's like a little apartment in New York, right?
it's like a little efficiency apartment. It was a very small place.
Wow.
But it was great. I mean, we sold our stuff. We were living kind of a minimalist lifestyle. It was a tiny little house that had a duplex apartment built on the same lot. And the great thing about it is that by moving into that house, we could live for free. The rent on the apartments paid the mortgage for the entire place. So, we had no mortgage payment for 5-6 years.
Wow.
And we were able to save all of our money that we would normally pay for a mortgage and buy a sailboat and put money aside for a cruising kitty. And that's exactly what we did. And it was really kind of nice. We didn't have a lot of stuff. We didn't have a lot of toys, a lot of junk, so we did that, and then we decided, hey, let's go ahead and find a boat. And so we did. We started looking around, and we found a hull that had been built. It was a really interesting boat made out of steel that a guy in San Diego had built and never finished. So it had been sitting for almost 10 years. And it was basically just the hull. There was no furniture inside of it, no beds, no electronics. That he had put the motor inside this thing.
That's
and
important.
Yeah, right. And it was 45 foot long. It was a good sized boat, and it was steel, which my wife Tammy was really happy about because of the safety of a steel boat versus fiberglass.
Right.
She'd read a lot of stories about people running into whales and their boat sinks.
That's something I would have never thought about, honey. First of all, we're gonna have to get a Carnival cruise ship to pack all our shit. But are we going to hit a whale? Because if we do, we probably should go with steel. So you're selling you buy a 45-foot steel boat, but you were practicing in a little lake in New Mexico. I feel like you were like in a little John boat, and then all of a sudden you went to, you started in the SS Minnow, but then you got this huge, ship, this cargo ship,
Right. And it was
that kind of how it went?
completely different experience. Yes, totally unprepared.
I love
Didn't know what we were doing,
All right, grab the kid. We're going to sea via the desert.
throw some granola bars in there. Let's go, baby. So yeah, so we worked on this boat. We trucked it out from San Diego, California. That's where we bought it. We trucked it to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it's a big ocean going vessel, and you don't see anything nearly that size in Albuquerque because there's no water big enough to put something like that in. And we had it up on, I made some stands for it. I welded up some stands and parked it at my folks' house because they had a big lot, and worked on it for a couple of years, for about 2 years. Pretty hardcore work to get it all built out and finished and ready to go to sea. And then we trucked it back to San Diego, and we popped it in the water, and I put sails on it. And I've never had sails on it before, so I put some sails on it. And then our first trial of that thing out in the bay was exactly what you were saying. We didn't know what we were doing, and we're drifting around San Diego Bay, and aircraft carriers are coming by honking at us. I mean, it was a little scary.
That's what I was going to ask you. Was any of your buddies like, Les, let's go to the bar. Let me get you a beer. Let's talk about this. What's going on? Is there something going on,
Yes.
or is there a breakdown? You need to talk to someone, because are you looking at what you're doing?
Oh yeah. And people that we were working with, the wife and I were working with, they told us we were crazy. They told us we were selfish to take our daughter with us like that and to put her life in danger. I mean, all kinds of people just,
That was just motivation. They didn't even realize it.
Right, yeah, exactly. Who's going to listen to them?
Right.
What do they know?
What do they know?
What do they know?
They've never sailed this desert before. I'll show them.
But it worked out really well, man. I mean, we slowly learned what we were doing, and we took a couple of charter trips where we went, and we chartered a similar sized boat and took some lessons, on how to navigate this thing, and how to park it, and how to get it out of the slip without killing people, and did a couple of those to kind of get familiar with it, and then we said, okay, I think we're ready to go. And so then we quit our jobs, and we drove the last load of stuff that we had, which wasn't much, out to San Diego, and loaded it on the boat. And Tammy my wife had a little pickup truck at the time. We had that loaded up, and once we unloaded everything and put it in the boat, we sold that last vehicle, and we took off. And we said, okay, we got 2 years worth of cruising. Let's go. Didn't really have a destination. We just figured we'd go south, because it was a little warmer. And we sailed out of San Diego. We went down the coast of Baja. It was about 1,100 miles to Cabo San Lucas. And we stopped in Cabo San Lucas for a couple days and got some more groceries and some water. And then we crossed the Sea of Cortez and went up into the Sea of Cortez, over towards mainland Mexico. And then we started heading down mainland Mexico, and we got to Mazatlan, and we spent Thanksgiving in Mazatlan and a Christmas there, which was kind of cool because it's pretty warm. And then we sailed from Mazatlan down to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And we were going slow, we weren't going fast. We were taking our time. We were doing a lot of surfing and a lot of exploring and having a good time. And when we finally got to Puerto Vallarta, we gone for.
I think I'm starting to lose you a little bit there, Les.
Oh, sorry. How's that? Any better?
Oh yeah, that's perfect. There we go.
Okay.
So you said you landed from you can't remember if you said your last destination, but then you landed to PV.
Yep, Puerto Vallarta, and we really liked it, but we'd been gone for a while, and we were kind of deciding whether or not we were going to keep going south, or if we were going to try and go back to the States, or what. And we ended up deciding we were going to just stay in Puerto Vallarta for a while and make a go of it down there. So we took the remaining money from our cruising kitty, and we opened up a coffee shop.
So you said, how long were you actually out on the water?
living on the boat for, oh, hard to remember exactly. I'm going to say we probably lived on the boat for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is
All
it like
in.
to wake up every morning and look out and just see water? For me, I'm already
Oh
panicking.
man.
I'm like,
No,
oh,
no, it's great. You know, it's like sleeping on a big waterbed. You know, you're just gently rocking when
but I
it's not
guess it is like
storming.
total freedom, right? There's no boss, there's no TV, there's nothing to distract you. I mean, you're there, you're with your family. You can, God, my wife would hate me, I think, after like day one. She's like, "You're still
No,
here?"
no, 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 no. Always something to do. You know, always something to fix. Tons of maintenance. You know, little villages to go explore. You know, we had some bicycles. We brought our bicycles with us on the boat. So we'd bicycle around. We had a little dinghy, little
Yeah.
inflatable boat that we would get to shore on, you know, and we'd go explore little towns and see what kind of stuff they were selling. You know, they usually were selling fruits and vegetables, and some people were selling river rocks for whatever reason. You know, who knows? But yeah, great exploring. You know, and we saw a lot of cool wildlife. You know, some of my better memories. I would work. I would when we were moving the boat. I would be up on watch like through the night, and then my wife and daughter would take the watch in the morning from like 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. And our daughter would sit up on the bow of the boat and strap on to so she wouldn't fall off. And I can remember walking up there one morning, and there were dolphins swimming along the bow, just like 5 feet off from where she was sitting. And they were looking up at her, and she was looking down at them, and it was just so cool. I mean,
That's cool.
the experience and the wildlife and the turtles and the whales and the dolphins and just all kinds of really neat wildlife out there. The birds and
So
real peaceful.
did you guys have to take a watch every night when you were
When we were moving the
when you were
boat,
moving?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. Whenever we were moving, we'd take 3-hour watches, and you have to be up on top of the boat, up in the cockpit, scanning the horizon. Especially at night, there's a lot of freighters, which were the worst because the freighters move pretty fast. They're moving at like 20, 25 knots,
Mm-hmm.
and we're moving at like 6, if that. And so they come up on you very fast, and the freighters especially don't have many lights, so you don't see them until they're very close to you, and it's kind of scary. The cruise ships are lit up like Christmas trees. You'll see them, a long ways away, and you can stay out of their way. But the freighters were kind of scary because they would come up on you so fast.
Ugh, see,
And
there's another thing. I'd have forgot about the whales, so we'd have hit one of those. I wouldn't have had
uh-huh.
anybody, setting up watch because we'd have been asleep, and then we'd have hit a freighter. Yeah.
Yeah.
All this is
Or
a
the
recipe.
freighter hits you.
Right. All this is a recipe of the Crouches aren't doing that. I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not. This is a not category. So you guys did that, and then you landed in PV, and you said you opened up a coffee shop. So you went from blowing shit up to getting on a boat for a year and a half, and now you're going to open up a coffee shop in a country that you don't speak the language.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Because
sounds yeah. I mean, that's what I would do.
sounded like a good idea at the time,
Why
right?
not?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we really liked Puerto Vallarta, and we said, gee, we're not ready to go back to the States yet. Let's see what we can do down here to make some money. And so, like I said, we had some money left in our cruising kitty because we'd saved up enough for 2 years, is what we figured. And so we found a space that was not being utilized in the marina right there in downtown Puerto Vallarta,
Mm-hmm.
and we leased it up, and we started to build out on it. We built the bar area. We put air conditioning in it. We had to do a bunch of electrical wiring to support the equipment for the coffee shop, and then we bought the equipment for the coffee shop, and we opened the coffee shop, and it was coffee, we made some snacks kind of stuff, sandwiches, breakfast paninis, and we had a little internet cafe. We had like three computers in there, and then we also had some used books. We thought, well, we'll try the used book thing.
Yeah.
And do like a book exchange, because we noticed that there were not a lot of English books available in Mexico, and so yeah, it was a kind of a combination coffee shop, internet cafe, and used bookstore.
So, did
And
you have any history of making coffee prior to landing there?
not at all, not at all. We didn't even drink coffee.
I mean,
But
is anybody else at home like scratching their head like, wait. But this is what I'm telling people. This is what they don't understand. People say they're going to do it and they don't do it. This guy does it. He's like, hey, you want to start a glass making company? I was like, glass, let's do it. Tomorrow, you got a glass making company. You ever done it before? Nope. Looks neat though. Yeah.
we
And by the way,
watched
we're going to do it in a
YouTube
country
video.
where we don't speak the language. I love
Well,
it though.
my wife went. She took a 3-day class. She flew up to Seattle and took a 3-day barista class so she could learn how to make espresso.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was our background in the coffee business, and it worked out great. You know, it was a really neat little place. We had some really kind of funky decor inside. We had these. I was riding my mountain bike around the little villages close by Puerto Vallarta, and I found this artist that made these paper mache animals. Really cool, like tigers and elephants and giraffes and stuff. You know, pretty good size, like 4 foot. You know, like from the
Yeah.
head and neck. And so we brought some of those in and we put them up on the wall, and then we hung Hawaiian shirts on their torsos. And I mean, it was just a really cool place. It was a lot of fun, and it was in a perfect location because we had a lot of tourism.
Right.
The local Mexicans loved it, you know, because the products were good that we served. You know, the food was good, the coffee was good, and it was a great little business.
Uh,
It was fun.
I was going to ask you, how were you accepted? You know, being, I mean, you're foreigners there. You just land there. I mean, what is that like to live there? Do you have to get like a dual citizenship, or do you have to like? How does that work? Like
Yeah, you have to get visas. You have to get like
visas?
long-term visas. Yeah, and they're like they were a special visa that was good for like 6 months, I think, is what it was. And it was expensive, and you know you had to jump through a lot of hoops, and you had to prove that you had money in your bank account so that you wouldn't be a drain on their economy.
Right.
You know, lots of hoops to jump through, but we did. We got all those things in place, put them all together, and then we ended up deciding, you know, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to stay. We needed to learn the language, so we started taking some lessons, and we took about 2 months, 3 months of Spanish lessons right before our daughter started high school, because she didn't have any Spanish. None of us had any Spanish, and so we did a couple months of lessons, and then she jumped into school, which was a private Mexican high school, and most, probably 90% of her classes were in Spanish. So she learned the hard way just by fire. We were lucky there were enough tourists there that spoke English that we didn't have to only speak Spanish,
Right.
and she learned the language much quicker and much better than us because she was younger anyway. And so we learned the language. And you know, the business side of the coffee shop was interesting because, you know, things are a little different than they are in the United States, and people want payoffs, they want bribes, and you know, there's different police. There's the sign police that would come by and say that our sign didn't conform, and you know, for $100 our sign could conform. You know,
Yeah, that's what
the
I was
stuff.
going to ask you. Let's get into the
Yeah.
really good stuff. All this glossy, happy stuff. All right, let's wipe that off. Gone. Let's get into the good stuff. Is the corruption real?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, very real. But it's right up front. You know, it's like, hey, we can reach an agreement here. You know, and it's always a number. You know, what's the number make you guys happy and make you not come back for another couple months with your hand out.
Well,
And,
is it one of those things where, $100 makes this guy happy, but who else comes by and go, hey, I'm also the sign police. I need 200, you know?
yes, yes, there are, and that's the danger in dealing with these guys is, once somebody realizes that you're going to pay them off, then they go tell their buddies, and their buddies show up with, some new requirement that, so it's difficult. It's really hard to do business in a country outside the United States because you really don't know what the rules are, and maybe there are no rules.
But you have to pay, right? I mean, at the end of the day,
You,
you got to pay.
you usually do. You can try and threaten them. You can try and say, "Hey, I'm going to report you," but a lot of times the police are part of it, and so that makes it a little difficult. But there was kind of like an equivalent of the Better Business Bureau, and you could call these guys, or you could at least threaten to call these guys, say, hey, if you guys don't go away with these requests, we're going to call these guys and report you. And sometimes that would work. It'd scare them off for a while, but they usually came back.
I would have never thought, all you have to say is the Better Business Bureau, and these guys are like, all right, I'm out. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, and they usually would just kind of, they weren't that quick to run away. They'd throw stuff at you as they were walking away, kind of thing. But it was interesting, and my wife she did such a good job at it. She was a master with it.
I couldn't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
What a unique situation, interesting situation to be in, though. So then you did the coffee shop thing, and you had that running for how long?
We ran that for 2 years, and this was well into our daughter's high school education. She spent all 4 years in that high school. And so we ran it for 2 years, and then we sold it to a Canadian lady that was very interested in buying it. And then my wife started looking around for something else to do, and she sold some real estate and did some property management for a while. And I was doing a couple odd jobs as well. I worked for a yacht broker. We sold our boat and bought a condominium because it was just too hard to live on the boat and live a land life at that point. So we sold our boat, bought a condominium, and I was working for the yacht broker because he and I got along really well. And I thought, well, this is a fun job. So I started selling yachts, and it was great because a couple times a week I'd go out on sea trials and sail other people's boats and chase dolphins around the bay and get paid for it. It was a good gig, and so we did that for a couple more years until our daughter graduated from college, and then she went to actually North Carolina to NC State. Got a great scholarship to NC State, and at that point we had sold the coffee shop. We didn't really have much keeping us in Mexico. And we said, gee, let's look for something else to do.
So, real quick with your daughter, so with her living in Mexico, but she would be a U.S. citizen, how does that work for college? Is that that's definitely out-of-state tuition?
Yes, it is. And, it was kind of odd because the transcripts, when she started applying for college, they're asking her, where'd you go to high school? Well, I went to high school in Mexico. And they're like, what? And so there was some problems there as far as trying to get the transcripts to be equivalent to what a high school in America would be. And we had to prove that, her curriculum was equivalent to an American education. But in a way, it was actually kind of a benefit because our daughter was very intelligent, and she was a good kid, and she had some neat projects that she had done. One of the things that she and my wife had put together was a bookmobile project where she would bring books up to these little poor villages that were close to Puerto Vallarta, they had no books, they had no libraries, and it was like a lending library, a mobile lending library. And so when my daughter started applying for scholarships to colleges in the United States, she had a unique story. It was a good story. She had a lot of, like the Bookmobile project was a good community service project. She had good academics, and it was kind of a benefit because she had a great story, and she ended up getting a really, really good scholarship at NC State. And so, it was a blessing. It worked out really well for us.
Good for her, man, and good for you guys too.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what she's got some stories that no one else can tell.
right.
You know, I mean that's legit. Everybody, they're sitting around, the party's drinking a beer, and they're like, "Oh yeah, what'd you do this summer?" Well, I don't know what you did, but I know what I was doing the last 8 years, and we were having a good time learning.
Oh yeah, yeah. One of her good stories is for her 18th birthday. We went to, like, Puerto Vallarta has a huge alternative community. It's kind of like known as the San Francisco of Mexico.
Okay.
And so there's a huge gay lesbian community in the downtown area of Puerto Vallarta, and they have a center there, like a clubhouse kind of thing, and they were showing the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and so we took our daughter for her 18th birthday to the gay and lesbian community center and watched the Rocky Horror Picture Show in Spanish, and it was so much fun.
How could it not be?
Right?
So, God, just sitting back and you've told me some of these stories before, but even though me sitting here and listening to them again, it's just, it takes a lot, man, to walk away from a job, because people here, we don't do that. You find a job, it's a good job, you work for 30 years, you hope you retire, but that kind of lifestyle, probably, what would you say, your parents' generation, that's what they did, right? I mean, you find the job at the factory or the mill or wherever, and you work it. Maybe you're part of the union, maybe you're not. You're loyal to the company, and then you work for the pension, right?
Mm-hmm.
But man, you have just said no, sir, to you. We're doing it this way, which brings me to another thing that when I first thought about doing this show, you're one of the first handful of people that popped in my mind, because I learned so many different things when I talk to you from time to time. But one of the coolest things you had taught me about, or told me about, I never heard about, was the pilgrimage that you went on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was last year, and you told me there was this. And for those at home listening, it's actually on Netflix. It's called The Way,
Mm-hmm.
and it has Martin Sheen in it and Emilio Estevez as well. But it's a movie that describes what you and your family went on for your pilgrimage, your portion of this thing last year, right?
Yes, yes. Yep, it's called the Camino de Santiago,
Yes.
and there's actually several different routes. There's like 15, established routes of the Camino de Santiago, and the Camino de Santiago is basically translates to the road to St. James. And in northwestern Spain, there's a town called Compostela, and there's a big cathedral that they built there, huge cathedral, and supposedly the relics, the bones of St. James, are buried in the cathedral there. So it's a lot of religious significance. And for the last almost 2,000 years, pilgrims have taken pilgrimages across Europe to the Camino, to the cathedral, to visit the bones of St. James, and it's a sacred place, and they've done it for so long that all these routes are established, and the main route goes from France along over the Pyrenees Mountains along the north coast of Spain to the cathedral. The route that we chose, because we didn't have a lot of time, was about 120 miles, and we went from Portugal in south of Camino of Santiago to where the cathedral was. We went north through Portugal, across the Spanish border into Spain, and then up to Santiago. And it was beautiful. It was great. And you know, along these routes, they have these kind of like hostels. They call them albergues, and
Albergues.
they're albergues, and they're like little like dorm rooms basically, where you pay €5 or €10 and you get a bed for the night and a shower. And you know, you're just walking through little villages and people's cornfields, and you know, meeting other pilgrims from all over the world that are doing these pilgrimages, you know, these routes for all kinds of different reasons. You know, some people are doing it for religious reasons, some people are doing it for just personal discovery, some people are doing it for vacation. I mean, you know, whatever. There's just a wide range of people, and it's a super neat experience. And so we did the Camino, the Portugal Camino is the route that we did last year, and it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun.
And you were saying that when you go to these little hostels or villages or whatnot, you actually have like a passport, right? That they stamp or something.
Yeah, yeah. When you start your pilgrimage, they give you a blank passport, and it's your pilgrimage passport. And then every one of these little albergues that you stay at, they all have their individual stamp, and they stamp your passport with their personalized stamp, and then they date it. So you can, at the end of your journey, you open this thing up, and it shows all the different places that you've been along the route. And it's not just the inns, but some of the bars and the restaurants that you stop at along the way. They have a stamp as well, and they'll stamp your passport. Some of the little churches, they have them as well. So it's a really neat record, you know. And the thing is about 4 feet long when you pull it all out, and you've got all these different stamps with all the different dates. And then when you get to the cathedral at the very end, there's like an official cathedral office, and you show them your passport, and if you have walked more than 100 kilometers, then they give you a certificate that says you've successfully completed this pilgrimage. And you know, it has a bunch of Latin words in it that who knows what it means, but it's kind of cool. You know. And so it's a nice little keepsake, and it shows that, you know, that you've done one of the pilgrimages.
So how far is 100 kilometers? I'm
100
horrible at
kilometers
conversion.
is about 62 miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
you received that little certificate, right?
yes, we all got our certificates, and we actually did about 120 miles for our walk, for our
And
pilgrimage.
how long did it take you to do the 120 miles?
That was about 12 days.
That's kind of getting it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, we were averaging about 10 to 12 miles a day, sort of, you know, is what it worked out. And like I said, that was kind of a shorter route. The main route, which leaves from France, is almost 500 miles.
Wow.
You leave France and then go, you know, through Spain.
But I'm sure you guys had to have met some amazing or interesting people in your 120 plus mile journey.
Really cool people, you know, and as you're walking along, you're talking to them, and they've all got their own stories and their own reasons for doing their pilgrimage. And you know, you might see them one day and you might not see them for a couple days, and then you pop in somewhere for a coffee in the morning, and there they are again, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, you know, my old friend from 3 days ago or whatever. And it is, it's a real neat community of pilgrims. And you know, at one point we were walking through this very rural area in Spain, and this lady came running up to my wife and I, and she had something in her hand. I didn't know if it was a rock or a brick or what, and I was kind of nervous because I thought she was going to hit us with this thing. And she came out and she started telling us in Spanish, which I've got a little bit of now, you know, just enough to know that she wasn't trying to hit
To
me with a
rob you.
brick. Right. She had a piece of this homemade cornbread and she wanted to give it to us, and she told us that she grew this corn in her little field, and she pointed to her little field next to her house, and she was telling us it was white corn and not yellow corn, and it was the best cornbread. It was not like the cornbread we're used to. It was more like a real heavy, dense bread,
Yeah.
and it was so good. And she said, "Yeah, I want to give you this because I know you're on a pilgrimage and you need your strength so you can make it to Santiago, and may God be with you." And it was just the coolest thing. Just she saw us walking down the path, and she came running up with the cornbread to give us to fortify us on our journey. And it was like, wow, this is great.
How cool is that? There are still nice people in the world.
Oh yeah,
They're just not around us.
you got to be in the right spot,
You
right?
got to be in the right spot. It's the old people, man. The old people are still
Yep.
nice.
Yep, and all along the way, these people would wave and they'd say "Buen Camino," have a great walk, have a great trip, and they recognize you as pilgrims, because usually you're carrying a backpack and you look all worn out. But it was neat. It was a great experience.
So you had mentioned that you may do another one, or
Yes, we're
okay.
planning on doing the French one,
Wow.
which is the long one, and that's coming soon. So we've got our dates set, and we're gonna be attempting that one here pretty soon.
Wow. Well, you'll have to
Yeah,
come back on and let us know how that, share some of the stories, because I'm sure there's going to be some good stories from it.
you bet.
But
You
circling
bet.
back around now, but you also, I did want to give you an opportunity to talk about you're actually roasting your own coffee again,
Yes.
so to speak,
Yes.
right? And you have your own company name, you have your own logo, and you're actually
Yes.
selling your product down there because for those listening, Les is in Sarasota, Florida. He's not, he's not local. So if you wouldn't mind, what's the name of your coffee company again?
Mistretta Coffee Company.
Mastretta. I'm gonna have to write that
Mm-hmm.
down because I'll put a link
Mm-hmm.
up on the YouTube channel for all 4 people that watch if they want to check out your
Super.
website. Can you spell it?
Yep. Mistretta.
All right.
Yeah. Yep. And I found this really cool coffee roaster on Craigslist, and ever since the coffee shop, I always wanted to, we did the barista side of things, but we never ever roasted.
Right.
And I always was intrigued with the roasting process. I thought it was really cool. We used to buy our coffee in Puerto Vallarta from this guy that we called the communist because he was a legitimate communist. He was from Cuba, and we'd go down and talk to him, and he had a great big roaster, and man, this stuff smelled so good. You'd smell it for 2 blocks away as you were going in to buy it, and bring it back. And so I found this coffee roaster on Craigslist, and I said, man, I'm going to get it. So I picked it up, and it's a great little roaster. I can roast about 6 pounds of coffee at a time. And I bought 3 different kinds of beans, one from Kenya, one from Brazil, and one from Guatemala. And I've been I think I'm on roast number 37 right now. So each batch I log, the particulars of, the gas pressure, the temperature of the bean. Each one of them gives you a little profile, and it's just so much fun. I'm just having a blast with the coffee roasting. And these are specialty coffees. They're really flavorful. The Brazilian coffee has a chocolatey flavor. It's real creamy.
Yeah.
The one from Guatemala is supposed to kind of have banana flavors to it. So, it's just really neat. And then you can blend them all together, and it's just infinite possibilities of what you can do with these things. And roast them a little darker, they taste a little different. Roast them a little slower, they taste a little different. And so we're having a blast with the coffee roasting.
There's like a lot of chemistry. There's some science that goes behind it. It's not just putting beans in there and hitting the button, right? I mean,
yes, no, there's tons of science that's way over my head, and it's biology and plant specifics and caramelizing proteins into sugars, and it's like I don't even attempt to understand it. but it's really interesting stuff. And I just know that when I have a fresh roasted batch of coffee and I put it through my grinder and run it through my espresso machine, it is the best thing on the planet, man. It is so good.
You know, I was fortunate enough. You sent me a couple samples, and I tried them, and thank you for that. But when I wake up early, like on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, kids are asleep, wife's asleep. If I can go downstairs, I may even sneak out into like the garage and turn on my little grinder and make myself just my own little, you know, sitting there, my own little
Yes.
blend of coffee that you sent me.
Refuge.
Yes.
Yeah.
It beats the Folgers or the Maxwell House. Whatever one was 17 cents cheaper at the grocery store, that's the one I buy. But just know there are those mornings where I'm still enjoying that sample. I'm like, yes.
Dude, I will send you another bag, man. I've got the latest blend, so we'll put it in there.
And is it Mistretta.com or just?
Nope, just Mistretta Coffee Company. We haven't got a website up yet for it.
Coffee Company. But they can find you on Facebook, right?
They can find us on Facebook, and if they ever happen to be in Parrish, Florida, at Brown's Farm Market, we've got it on the shelves at Brown's Farm Market.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, I will not keep you any longer. I appreciate you taking time out, and tell Tammy thank you for letting me steal you for a little while and fighting through our technical difficulties we had earlier. But, hey, man, it was a pleasure. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope everyone learned a lot tonight. I know I did.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Brandon. Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening.
Hey, you're welcome. Plus, I do think I would like to have you back on. I mean, I know I will, to back on and talk about your new journey that you're going to hopefully go on. And I'm sure there's more chapters to the Less Travel book that I'm excited to hear about in the future.
Sounds great.
All
Love
right.
to.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.